Alright, welcome back to another installment of Julian's Random Projects. Today, a bit of nostalgia for the folks that were buying video games or growing up in the early 2000s, late 90s, the Dreamcast. I remember the Dreamcast coming out in late 99. It was one of the consoles that came out around the time I had a job and I could afford to get these things for myself if I so pleased. And I remember looking at the specs and trying to decide, is this thing going to be better than a PlayStation or any other number of consoles that were out at the time. And I remember thinking that they were definitely ahead of themselves with having a 56K modem built into it, and so networking, that kind of a thing. And a lot of they had network browsers. I was under the impression, because I was a bit of a geek and I knew what Windows CE was, and I thought that this thing was going to have an operating system that was Windows. That ended up not being the case. Windows CE was used as a development tool to convert your games. If you already built a game for another system or another architecture for the processor, you could use Windows CE tools and a Windows IDE, a development environment, to convert your games over with a bit more ease. And so they were hoping to capture developers that were interested in making a bit more money or licensing their game for yet another console. So that was that. A lot of people are under the impression it runs Windows CE. I'm highly confident it doesn't, which is why these weren't reverse engineered to the point where you could just boot boot Linux into it or boot some sort of base version of Windows on here. That hasn't happened to my knowledge. So a lot of the games, a lot of the hacking efforts were mostly around piracy of the games, and there's a number of videos, some really great ones done. The guy's the Vintage Modern. What's this guy's name? That's right. It's the Vintage Modern Gamer on YouTube. He's already done a great video outlining the GD-ROMs and how they were circumvented. It gets very technical, so go take a look at those. I'll put a link down in the description for it. But I wanted to show you guys. I wanted to add a Dreamcast to my collection for quite a while. It was something I missed out on. Like I said before, I was interested in video games, but I had a job and I had a life and a career I was trying to develop, so I didn't have time to play them. And so dropping down the money it would take to get this, some accessories and a couple of games, it often took a backseat to, rent or having a girlfriend, these kinds of things. So now I'm interested in getting back into it or exploring what I missed, if you were. So instead of, these have gotten expensive, these consoles and the games, and so I stumbled across someone's yard sale the day before the 20th anniversary for the Dreamcast. And a tip to anybody that's interested in yard sales, garage sales, lot sales, whatever you want to call them, if you're on the hunt for something, whether it's camera lenses or vintage video games or old paintings, whatever the case is, ask the person hosting. Be polite, introduce yourself, let them know what you're looking for, because a lot of times they've got a garage full of stuff and they're pulling things out throughout the day, and they've not gotten to prepping. A lot of people don't, for their yard sales, this isn't something they do as a small business, so they're not uber prepared. But if they know they've got a box of old Canon lenses tucked way back in the garage somewhere, and they are planning on bringing it out for the garage sale, they haven't gotten to it yet, and you ask for it explicitly, they'll go rummaging for it. And that's exactly what happened here. I said, I'm interested in old video games, and they said, oh, we don't have any old video games. And I said, okay. I said, any video games? I said, I'm really looking for stuff that was pre-internet, things that didn't need to go online to play. And his eyes lit up. He's like, oh, I've got an old Dreamcast. And sure as shit, guy pulls out a stack of games, a console, a couple controllers, including one of these guys that has a controller with the VMU, which was the memory unit, which also doubled as a Tamagotchi-style video game that you could play on the fly, or you could maybe trade them with your friends. I can't remember what it was. Maybe there's a link-up cable, I don't remember. But I do remember being able to both see contextual information while you're in the game, maybe scores or maybe a sub map or something. We'll have to get into some of these. But that was fascinating to me at the time. I thought it was a really good innovative step in that direction to use this as a secondary display for information that related to the game, and then just super cute really is the ability to play them on the go, up, down, left, right, A, B, select and start here. So hopefully we can get this thing up and running. It looks like it takes some CR2032s. I've got a bunch of those sitting around. We'll get this thing cleaned up and tossed in there. So Point being, it doesn't hurt to ask. That's the point. So let's go through the games we've got. A number of these demo discs, I guess you had to subscribe to these, or maybe you bought, I was supposed to say you bought them from a store, but then it says do not, or not for sale here. Probably a magazine subscription, either through one of the video game, like as a leaflet that was stuck into a thicker video game quarterly, or maybe from Dreamcast or from Sega themselves. I don't remember. But what's great about these is they're playable demos. So for Jet Set Radio or Jet Grind Radio, depending on where you are, I'm really interested in playing that some more, even if it's not the full game. I think it's super nifty as a game, and so that'll be fun to dig into. Let's see here. San Francisco Rush, Tokyo Extreme Racer, if that's playable, that is playable, very cool. Tony Hawk, also I've heard good things about that. Where was the other one? Oh yeah, I saw recently there's a bunch of YouTube videos of people highlighting the fact that this thing had hit its 20-year anniversary. And Jet Set Radio, or Jet Grind Radio, was one of the first like open world games where you could actually navigate a city and just kind of explore and do what you want to. So that was very innovative at the time, super cool. Bass fishing, very nice. I didn't bother to check to see if they were all in here. So I got all this stuff for $20. So at $20, you don't, it'll split hairs about whether or not they're in every single one of these things. It also helps to ask what folks are hoping to get for the thing. I probably would have, if he had said, "What are you thinking?" I would have started with $50. I mean, I know that this thing alone's worth $50 if it works. We don't know yet. And then all these games, my cursory search of games was like $20 per game on eBay. So I would have said $50 easily to, with the risk that some of these aren't going to work and that I have to put some love and care into getting them up and running again. But as soon as he said $20, I said sold. And I'm not going to sit here and go through each one of these things and check them. Yeah. Let's see, Sonic. Dino Crisis. I looked this up earlier. It's kind of a Resident Evil, and actually I think one of the guys that created, there it is, creators of Resident Evil, sorry. I quickly looked up some of these games on YouTube to see what the gameplay looked like, and if there was anything that I wanted to jump right into, or that had maybe had a lot of interest from the community of saying, something like Metal Jesus does the hidden gems, if you will, for a console. So Dino Crisis is that if you're into horror games, sort of like traversing maps to solve puzzles kind of a game, and dinosaurs. So if you're into that, I think this would be a good one to pick up. Sonic Adventure 2. It's in here. Yes, it's in here. Awesome. SDR Line. I know that was a big deal for people to get online and play other people around the world. That was really, really cool over 56K modem. And they weren't transferring a lot of data back then. It was just your player's position and maybe the value of the weapon you were using and where you were aiming it at, that kind of a thing. So it's still pretty lightweight. There wasn't a lot of multimedia going on, or like voice chat necessarily. It's just enough to get the game to be playable over the internet. Choo Choo Rocket. Saw some people playing this. It looked like a ton of fun. Apparently this is one of the first multiplayer games either ever or for the Sega Dreamcast. I don't remember, but looked like a ton of fun. Let's see, an emulator. This, if not this, Volume 1, maybe it wasn't this exact one, it was a later one. There was who covered that? I think that the Modern Gamer covered this one, or one like it, where he described the scene, if you will, the underground scene of getting a game the day it launched, or a couple days before it launched, ripping it, and immediately making it available on the internet. This is before BitTorrent existed, and it was a scene I wasn't plugged in at the time, but I've learned a lot about it since then, and it's just fascinating. It's a testament to if there's a will, there's a way for people to circumvent technology. And so in this case, people were doing raw dumps of the discs with like modified firmware, like a specific CD-ROM in a PC with some modifications. They were able to read all the files from this and dump it into an ISO file. And one of the files inside of that disk, if they broke it open, had a message to the guys that were eventually going to copy this and crack it, and it effectively gave them instructions on how to add different ROMs and include them in their own burned versions of this game. So the sky was the limit. So just about any Sega game at the time, that if you could get a ROM for it, you'd be able to play it on your Dreamcast. So this is in 99, 2000, 2001 kind of thing. Super, super cool. Another racing game. This one's got mixed results online about it being kind of difficult to play, but it had some interesting mechanics, like whatever your clock was for your Dreamcast, the weather and time of day would reflect that in the game. So if you enjoyed playing at night, you could, if you played video games at night, you'd be driving at night. Day in the game, and so there were reports of people that were trying to get a top score for a particular track, and it was easier to do it during the day, so they'd go in and change their CMOS battery or the CMOS time and their system, and then go back into the game. So fun little hacks like that. Tetris. I know the wife is super keen on seeing this one, so we're gonna give that one a whirl. She's really big into Tetris. And then D2. What was D2? D2 is another one of horror games, where you're like in a plane crash, and then there's aliens or zombies for some weird reason, and there's some like supernatural stuff going on, and then of course loads of machine guns. Even though you crash land in Canada, they're not known for having machine guns laying about. Maybe some hunting rifles or something in an old cabin, but I don't know that I'll be playing this one too much or at all. This is the kind of thing that like I'm not doing this as a profit thing. I do this because I enjoy fixing them. If this thing's broken, getting it up and running, maybe replacing the CD-ROM with one of those solid state SD card optical emulators, they call them. So it replaces it fakes the funk in the optical bay here and goes from SD card to whatever format the main board wants to get data from. The CD-ROM here, it'll match that. It'll also last longer and run cooler, these types of things. So that's really what I'm interested in doing. And so I often find an opportunity to take something like just this one here. It's in here. We weren't checking it out. So let's see. 3, 4. Yeah. So all the discs are in there. And so this might be the kind of thing that I pop up on eBay, and if it goes for 20 bucks, there we go. I've paid for all this stuff, and all the rest of this ends up being free to me to play with. So if you're interested in this stuff, just keep an eye out for these kind of deals. You can break into a hobby for not a lot of money if you're patient and you got cash. So I'm going to cut to me cleaning up probably this VMU to start with, and let's see if we can get this console, if it boots up, and if we can get that thing up and running. So these buttons are going to need to be cleaned up. At least up and down don't seem to be working all too hot. I bet they're just a bit dirty. I'll show you a little trick there with those if we pop this open. So okay, yes. Ooh, so fancy. It's a virtual memory unit. Okay. Alright, well, let's take it apart and get it cleaned up. Alright, trying to be mindful of that piezoelectric speaker there. I don't need to be snapping it off. I gotta go a little deeper. Oh, where did that thing come from? Hopefully there's like a rocker. Like that? Yeah, that's gotta be it. It's probably like that. Now, I do not for the life of me remember where I learned this. It was yet another YouTube video of someone, I think it was a British kid, getting stuff like this to repair off of eBay, whether it's as a hobby or a business, I don't remember. And he had a dead simple way of reviving some of these buttons, these membrane buttons, and they're called membrane because they're describing that little bit there that pops out, and as soon as you press it, it wants to return back to its original shape. So it's making a connection with this. Let me get my little fingers out of the way here. This is like a graphite doped bit of rubber here, and it makes contact with these pads, and so it shorts this pad to that pad through that that particular shape there, gives it more chances to do that on a couple different planes. So if you come in at an angle, it'll set it up for success, and you can still get it here or here or here. But over time, these oxidize, and they're not as conductive, and so they don't do so hot. As you guys saw when we were trying to set the date up and down, it was kind of hit or miss with those. So here is the trick. You get yourself a piece of paper, and one at a time, doesn't need a lot, you just drag it across the piece of paper. And that bit of scuffing up, there just gives it a fresh piece of graphite to connect to. There we go. See, already, might be hard for you guys to see, but they're not as shiny. And then there's one here, I can see it's shiny on one side and it's dull on the other, so I'm gonna give that guy another go. Try and hold it nice and flat against the paper. Yeah, very nice. And that's it, good as new. And so you'd also give this thing a visual inspection. Those look pretty clean. For completeness, if you found this because you're doing some Google search on how to clean up or fix a VMU, I'll show you how to clean up those pads as well. So you're just gonna get a regular number 2 pencil with an eraser and just give those a nice rub. If they're really bad and oxidized, you might need to break out the isopropyl. But here there's no sign of oxidation, so we're just trying to take off that like a microscopic layer that I'd suggest all metals have some level of oxidation on them, so we're just knocking that off. Having this open reminds me, there's a guy online, and I'll try and stitch in some still images, maybe some video if it exists, of a PCB that he's designed that I think uses an Arduino Zero or like a Teensy or something like that that can drive. I mean, like now we're into like damn near 2020, and they have very dense pixels per inch displays that are the same size as this and decent enough compute that can fit on a board like this or smaller, that can drive that display and have ample room for a battery. You can probably have hours and hours of playtime on a display like this and a small computer. So he makes a printed circuit board that just mimics these up, down, left, right, A, B, and select and start. If you find one of these VMUs just by itself, or it's broken or what have you, and you just want to use the exterior case, this guy sells a nifty little board. You drop it in, you maybe do a little bit of wiring up, and you're off to the races. You got yourself a cool little video game console in the palm of your hand. So at least as a conversation starter, it's pretty nifty. I don't think you're gonna want to sit there and set some world record on an arcade game or something like that. But to pass the time, pretty nifty. All right, it's clean enough for me. Let's get this thing back together. All right, it's a little bit better, but it's not amazing. Alright, so truth be told, it's a bit on the noisy side. That might be for another video where we go in and fix the fan. I know that I saw online some folks were modifying. There's like a 3D printed part to adapt it to one of these Noctua fans. It's a brand name. They're a lot quieter, higher quality stuff. Only they don't make, that brand doesn't make the same size of fan, so you have to make a little adapter so that it'll still fit. And then I think also the eject mechanism has to be modified as well. So maybe since then they do have the right size fan, we just drop it right in. That'd be pretty awesome. So one of the things I did learn as an aside watching Ben Heck convert one of these things to a handheld console was that the fan had to be on before the system would, or had to be connected before the system would boot. That's probably sensing that somewhere to make sure it's not unplugged, that it's not going to overheat. So join us next time on another one of Julian's random projects. Maybe we'll take a stab at getting this thing cleaned up, or like I said, maybe swap out the disk drive with solid state SD, so I don't sit here and swap out these disks all day. Who knows? Stay tuned.
Look at them. Huh?
Let's get scratching. Jet Set Radio! We put together a special demo just for you. In other words, you're getting a taste of the streets of Tokyo Go firsthand.
Here's something I noticed while I was cleaning this. It's got a little notch in here so that you can run the cable forward like you normally would. So the bottom, I understand that gives it some strain relief, but your preference might be to have this thing going forward towards the console, so it looks like someone's thought of that. That's pretty nifty.